Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
You're under arrest.
You guys have no right for this. Tyranny.
How a small BC town became a worldwide source of COVID disinformation.
So the Nuremberg Code protects us.
Also,
there's just this overall fairness perspective.
Calls to expand paid sick leave as COVID brings more staff shortages. And
it's all soft, like pumpkin should not go like that.
when good gourds
And that's where you have your rot.
go bad.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Well, how does a small BC town become a major source of COVID disinformation around the world? The website for the city of Dawson Creek had a video on it showing a council meeting where a guest speaker spewed conspiracy theories. And as the CBC's Andrew Kuryata reports, the city's credibility helped the video and its false messages go viral.
Excuse me. Hey, you guys have no right.
You're under arrest.
Dude,
You're
chill
on the
out,
street.
please. You guys have no right for this. Tyranny.
Dawson Creek RCMP pulled this protester from City Hall ahead of a council meeting in early September after he refused to wear a mask indoors. Outside, about 100 demonstrators gathered with signs and a message, determined to voice their opposition to BC's new vaccine card.
To have this meeting today.
But inside, council was simply trying to determine how the province's new regulations would impact the city and services like the public swimming pool and curling rink, not to debate the merits of the vaccines themselves.
Do we operate the facilities with the protocols that are in place under those public health orders, or do we close them?
But the elected councillors opened the floor to their constituents.
Brown shirts. Nazis. Nazis.
And after a difficult start, invited a few to share their complaints.
Gina.
Their messages, full of disinformation and conspiracies, was streamed on the official social media channels for the city of Dawson Creek, and one went viral.
74 years ago, the Nuremberg Code came about as a result of the atrocities that occurred during the Second World War.
This resident falsely compared the vaccine rollout to 1930s Germany and made other inaccurate or misleading statements.
No vaccine has cured any disease.
She called herself a molecular biologist, but online profiles show she works as an alternative healer who uses psychic readings and homeopathic remedies. Despite this, her message was picked up by anti-vaccine groups who called her a scientist and even a doctor. This expert says inventing or exaggerating credentials is a common technique in the anti-vaccine community.
So they bring in a fake experts who will provide contrary evidence to what the scientific consensus is, focusing on.
And he says Dawson Creek Council played a role in allowing this disinformation to spread too, because they gave the speaker a credible platform inside council chambers, on their official channels, and part of the public record. So even though the city has now removed the video from its pages, the damage is done. The misinformation from a false expert racking up tens of thousands of views and still being widely shared online. He says this should serve as a warning to other governments about hosting impromptu presentations.
I would maybe limit what I post online.
Something Dawson Creek City councillors say they've learned the hard way. Andrew Kuryata, CBC News, Prince George.
More information on two big vaccine mandates today. The requirements for federal public servants and anyone who wants to fly within Canada. Ashley Burke lays out the timelines for when everyone will have to prove they're fully vaccinated and what will happen if they're not.
As Canadians start to travel again, the government's starting to restrict who exactly can fly.
By the end of October, everyone 12 or older on a plane or train within Canada should be fully vaccinated.
A promise the Liberals fiercely campaigned on, now one of the government's first orders of business post-election.
There was very strong support for vaccine mandates.
That mandate includes showing proof of vaccination before boarding a plane, train, or cruise ship. Those still in the process of getting their shots can show a negative COVID-19 test until the end of November. And it's up to rail, cruise, and airline companies to verify and turn the unvaccinated away.
We need very rapidly, as a priority, to see from the federal government a standardized proof of vaccination and a digital form of proof of vaccination for air travel.
Some people flying today welcome the decision and hope it won't further complicate travel.
I think it's a great idea. I don't want to get sick.
It would be easier to have some kind of electronic passport.
Like, you have to show ID anyways. It's just another piece of information you're also showing.
It's not just travelers facing new restrictions. Airline and rail employees will also need to be vaccinated, so will federal public servants. They'll have until the end of the month to self-declare their vaccination status, or else they'll be put on leave without pay unless there's valid religious or medical reasons.
We're encouraging our members to get vaccinated. If there's reasons why they can't get vaccinated, certainly we will work with them, and we will defend the members that have any punitive action taken against them as a result of their vaccination status.
More than 250,000 federal workers are covered under this new policy, but there are many who aren't, including at Crown corporations, the military, and the House of Commons. The government is urging those employers to roll out similar vaccine mandates. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
In this province, that federal vaccine mandate will not apply to BC ferries. Neither staff nor travelers will have to show proof of immunization. A mask mandate remains for all indoor spaces aboard ferries and in terminals for all passengers 12 and over. Because it's been a private company since 2003, BC Ferries' more than 5,000 employees do not fall under the federal mandate. Vancouver's Evander Kane is being investigated by the NHL for allegedly using a fake vaccine card. Faking your vaccination status is illegal in Canada and the U.S. and is against the NHL's rules. According to the Associated Press, the league is looking into whether the San Jose Sharks forward gave them a fake card. The investigation is the latest in a series of allegations against Kane. He's been accused by his estranged wife of betting on NHL games, some of which were against his own team, but he was cleared of the charges last month. There are calls on the province to expand paid sick leave to further prevent COVID-19 outbreaks in long-term care homes. As the CBC's Zara Premji tells us, advocates say that's just one of the things that could have helped prevent the deaths of hundreds of seniors.
At least 800 seniors gone, losing their lives to COVID-19. Two of them, David and Irene Falk, they died 2 weeks apart in their care home after being married for 62 years.
We're entrusting our parents to the care of these homes, and we want them to have the best care possible.
BC Seniors Advocate says it's losses like that could have been prevented. Her latest report finds 40% of staff in care homes went to work feeling sick during the first two waves of the pandemic, and that was a contributing factor in all the deaths. 76% of first cases that led to an outbreak in long-term care came from a staff member.
Group of people I have a lot of sympathy for is the care home workers. They have limited paid sick leave, and they feel the need, they have to come in even when they're not feeling well. That's just completely unfair to them and to the people they work with.
Which is why paid sick leave is at the top of Mackenzie's recommendations.
The things we can do immediately. We can expand paid sick leave so that those staff who are displaying any symptoms of any infectious disease can stay home, and that those who need to isolate because of exposure can stay home.
Historically, everyone used to receive at least 18 days of sick pay. Now that's dropped to a third for many working in long-term care.
6 days of paid sick leave a year or less. And, in any year, that's not enough for healthcare workers. And in a pandemic, it was woefully inadequate to the task at hand. So we hope government acts on these recommendations.
Mackenzie says there are things that will help too, including hiring some registered nurses, eliminating shared rooms, and giving a third shot to residents. And while it's too late to save the Falks, their son says it's not too late to save the rest.
I really hope that they apply all of these things that they've learned, that it will reduce more deaths like this in the future.
BC's Minister of Health says a plan for province-wide sick leave for healthcare workers is being worked on with hopes of being implemented by January 1st. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Turning to today's COVID numbers now, 752 people in BC have tested positive for the disease. After nearly no deaths reported yesterday, 9 people have died from the virus in the last 24 hours. 5 more people are in hospital for a total of 350. 136 of those patients are in intensive care. Fraser Health is reporting the highest number of cases over the past several weeks. There are more than 2,300 people with COVID there right now, and that's more than double the region with the second highest number of Interior Health. The question of mandating vaccines for school staff in BC is still up in the air. BC's education minister says there is no province-wide public health order in place, so it's being left up to each of the 60 individual school districts to decide their own rules.
And we know that there has been a great deal of interest on the part of some boards to consider this question for themselves. And so we will do everything that we can to support boards in their decision-making process as employers.
She says the public sector vaccine mandate does not cover teachers because they are not directly employed by the BC government. Instead, the province will be offering guidance to school boards wanting to enforce their own mandates. And there are concerns with this approach that it will lead to a patchwork system with different requirements among dozens of school districts. Police believe a fatal shooting last night in Surrey is likely tied to the Lower Mainland gang conflict. Homicide investigators say the attack appears to be targeted. RCMP responded to reports of gunshots in Newton on 122nd Street and 80th Avenue shortly before 10 p.m. They say officers tried to revive an adult who had been shot, but they were unsuccessful. The name and gender of the victim has not been released. Police are looking for witnesses or anyone with dashcam video from the area last night. Vancouver police are looking for witnesses after a man was attacked by a stranger in the city's West End last month. The victim is a 52-year-old man, and he was walking to work near Davie and Howe Streets just after 5 in the morning. Police say that's when a man walking in the opposite direction randomly punched him in the face.
What we know is that the victim, right after he was assaulted, was picked up by a taxi and driven to a nearby hospital where he underwent surgery for a broken jaw. So because the victim was in hospital, that, of course, delayed a bit of the investigation. Police weren't notified until a few days later when he was able to speak with us.
She says the suspect is around 5 feet 10 inches tall with a husky build and broad shoulders. He was wearing a dark hooded sweater with a dark jacket on top, blue jeans, and a dark mask. Police are also looking to speak with a taxi driver who picked up the victim and took him to hospital. A Vancouver police officer has been convicted of sexually assaulting his colleague. 55-year-old Jugraj Roger Barar is guilty of 1 count of sex assault. The conviction is related to a 2019 incident in a Whistler hotel room. Barar's charge came months after the victim filed a complaint with Squamish RCMP, allegations he denied. The court says there was enough proof that consent was not provided because the victim was inebriated. Mounties say this is an isolated incident and Barar was not on duty during the night of the assault. Well, hundreds of residents inside a Burnaby housing co-op fear they could soon be forced out of their homes. For years, the property owner has leased the land to the co-op, but now that land is up for sale. As John Hernandez reports, residents say there would be nothing to stop a private landlord from coming in and driving up rents.
We could lose our place to live and our whole community.
Duncan Beaton wants to stay put. He's lived on the 19th floor of this housing co-op in Burnaby for nearly a decade. All the residents here chip in on maintenance and pay well below market rent.
You know, we are a little village within a big city, and the people just thrive on it.
The 244-unit affordable housing complex is home to single parents and vulnerable seniors on fixed incomes, but they fear their housing security is at risk.
The anxiety around maybe losing everything you've been in for 30, 25, 20 years is very real.
The property is owned by a pension fund for the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 115. It's been leased to the co-op for 40 years, but that ends on October 31st. The property is now up for sale on the private market, stoking fears that new landlords could turn it into market rental housing.
And what that means is that hundreds
of low-income senior households will be threatened with the loss of their housing security and potentially homeless in one of the most expensive housing markets in Canada.
In a statement, the pension fund said it attempted to sell the property to the province through BC Housing, but despite best efforts, they were unable to reach an agreement. They say they will not entertain offers from prospective purchasers without assurance that there will be no evictions or renovictions. Still, critics say promises only go so far.
We've heard that before, and frankly, it's empty words. There's no way to bind a buyer to treat a tenant population a certain way after a sale.
People that live here have lived a long time, and we're a little beyond promises and warm feelings and prayers and all that crap.
But the pension plan says its decision is made, so only time will tell what the future holds for these residents whose lives are up in the air. John Hernandez, CBC News, Burnaby.
The BC SPCA has seized 71 cats being hoarded in 2 motorhomes in Squamish. Protection officers rescued the animals from a rural property where they were living in unsanitary conditions. Cats were found hiding in cupboards under the dashboard, and newborn kittens were huddling beneath the passenger seat. The freed felines have since been relocated to a BC SPCA facility for medical care. Officials say the cats are friendly, but not up for adoption just yet. And if you're hoping to get the perfect pumpkin for Halloween carving, maybe you should act fast. A bad season means good gourds at one popular Fraser Valley farm have gone bad. As Anita Bathe reports, a fungus has swept through the patches and left one farmer reeling.
So this is what happened to all these pumpkins. Tender enough to mush your hands right through. A graveyard of hundreds of rotten pumpkins lingers at Mon Farms. Last week, farmer Amir Mon noticed a fungus infestation known as wet rot creeping up on the gourds.
It's a fungus that comes up from the soil. It goes into the pumpkin, it goes inside the pumpkin, and it's causing the pumpkin to go soft.
He says it's never happened so early in the season, nor has he lost so many pumpkins.
It was devastating. You know, it's a surprise from a farmer's perspective. Pumpkins take 120 days to grow. Spend 4 months to grow a crop, then all of a sudden lose 50% of it. But, you know, as farmers, we have to make the best with the cards that we're dealt.
It's not clear how much the loss has cost the farm. The farm says each normal pumpkin sells anywhere from $4 to $12 or more for the big ones. As for the rest of these rotten fruit, the possible cause?
I think climate change is a really big one. So the big heat wave that we had in August, I think it made an impact on our pumpkins.
Humidity mixed with abrupt rainy days is also the perfect formula for fungus.
And this looks like a really good example of fungi going wild.
This UBC botany professor echoes moisture is a big factor.
The fungi do really well in moisture. They basically spread through the soil.
She says pumpkins have a cuticle of wax that normally prevents fungal attack. But at this farm,
the fungus is basically secreting digestive enzymes into the pumpkin. And so instead of having a firm, resistant pumpkin flesh, the flesh turns to mush.
Mon is still working with the Ministry of Agriculture to investigate the fungus. It's not clear yet if other farms have experienced similar rotting.
Farming is a labor of love, and every single year is a new experience.
And to make a rotten situation positive, Mon Farms is donating the destroyed pumpkins to animal sanctuaries. And those still looking to pick up a plump pumpkin at the patch, Mon says there's still lots to go around. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Abbotsford.
I hope you and Wesley have got your gourd already.
We have not, Anita. Yeah, that was going to be our weekend soggy plan. Have you and Anya got yours?
We have not. So I think the two of us better act fast here.
We better, I know. Yeah, especially after that. But it is amazing that we continue to see the impacts from that heat dome trickle well into the fall. But we do have a very fall-like forecast, starting with the day we had today, everything but the kitchen sink. Let me take you to the satellite and radar where we've got patches of blue right now across parts of Metro Vancouver, thunderstorms to the south of us, a lightning strike not out of the question, and steady rain falling in through White Rock right now, spreading back into Abbotsford and Chilliwack, where we've had a pretty steady line of rain through the day today. This is all thanks to the center of the low crossing through the south coast. That's our recipe for this kind of weather. Things are going to stabilize out over the next couple of days, but check out this temperature trend. Staying cool through the long weekend and into early next week. Our seasonals for this time of the year are around 15. So I'll get you through that all important long weekend forecast and about whether or not we can go out for pumpkin hunting coming up a little bit later, Anita.
Okay, can't wait for the answer. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, the annual Fat Bear Week competition has crowned a new king, Otis the Grizzly. Otis took home the gold for packing on the pounds, going from a slender lad here to a big boy ready for hibernation. The yearly runoff of burly bears is an online celebration of the grizzlies in Katmai National Park in Alaska and to raise funds for the Katmai Conservancy. Fans voted for their favorite fatso from September 29th to October 5th. And thanks so much for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. I'm your host, Anita Bathe, and we always like to remind you that you can watch our program on our free app, CBC Gem. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Traveling on September 30th was a mistake.
The Prime Minister is apologizing after an ill-timed trip to Tofino. Exactly why he's sorry, next. You are watching our commercial-free live stream tonight, and Thanksgiving is just around the corner, and many in St. John's have been flocking to supermarkets to get their turkey, only to leave empty-handed. As Jeremy Eaton found out, it seems frozen turkeys have been flying off store shelves faster than staff can restock them. But is there really a shortage?
The truth is out there. And by truth, I mean turkeys, and by out there, I mean in here.
We have ample supply of turkeys in all our stores, and I think if families are looking to cook a turkey for Thanksgiving dinner, they should be okay.
That wasn't always the case. Recently, social media started tracking where birds were being sold. In some stores, they'd flown the coop by the time shoppers arrived. So people began lining up. Before stores even opened, customers waiting, hoping to get their hands on one. But was there really a shortage?
Yeah, it's a real thing, but the turkey category is pretty reliable. Come around Thanksgiving time, families are looking for turkeys. So sometimes it's a challenge to get supply, and this year in particular has been a challenging year, but we're in a real good shape in terms of our inventories.
Sobeys confirmed there was an increase in frozen turkey sales last week in Newfoundland, but says it's since replenished the supply. So I decided to take this to the top of the food chain, to the Turkey Farmers of Canada, to see if this same problem exists in other provinces.
We haven't noticed anything like that to the same degree in any other parts of the country at this time.
Planning out how many turkeys are needed for the Thanksgiving and Christmas season is something that happens nearly a year in advance.
We were lower on September 1st on our inventories, but there will be growth and there will be fresh product coming into the time period prior to Thanksgiving.
Back in St. John's, some stores have now placed a limit on just how many turkeys you can roll out with.
We're being careful to make sure that we're not, selling multiple items to folks and that sort of thing who look to be bulking up in a kind of a panic buy behavior. We will look to limit in different stores depending on our volume. What we're really trying to accomplish is to make sure that anybody who wants to buy a turkey for their family gathering, that we have one for them.
So the turkey farmers say they'll have enough supply to meet the demand. Grocery stores have confirmed that they'll have stock when you're looking to buy, but you might not want to wait before all the turkeys get gobbled up. Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, St. John's.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made his first official appearance after a rather ill-timed and heavily criticized vacation to Tofino, taken on the first day for Truth and Reconciliation. Today, he was quick to apologize and tried to turn the page on a scandal of his own making.
A moment of reckoning for skipping a day of reflection.
Traveling on September 30th was a mistake, and I regret it.
An apology, but no explanation, no rationale for why he took a vacation on a day devoted to reconciliation, on a holiday that he created as Prime Minister.
The how it happened is far less important than that it happened, which I regret, and we will continue to do even more on the path of reconciliation.
But as Trudeau tried to clean up his controversy, he was confronted with yet another one from the military.
They simply still don't get it. We have an awful lot of work to do.
The latest, the now rescinded appointment of Major General Peter Daw to review the findings of an external review into military sexual misconduct. This after Daw had previously been disciplined for providing a character reference for a soldier convicted of sexual assault.
There is a systemic problem with the treatment of women, the treatment of sexual harassment in the Canadian Armed Forces. It is clear that there is a toxic culture there.
Tough words, but ones this government has repeated many times, while repeatedly standing by Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan, as a series of scandals engulfed the military leadership and cries for change grew louder.
We will be naming our cabinet later this month, and the reflection that goes into every single job in cabinet is who is the right person to serve Canadians.
To this point, Trudeau has said Harjit Sajjan is the right person for defence, but there is a growing sense that could change, as Liberal insiders expect a new defence minister when the new cabinet is announced. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
As the COVID-19 case count climbs in New Brunswick, the province is implementing strict new measures in certain regions. Starting Friday, gatherings of more than a single household won't be permitted, except, as Chris O'Neill-Yates reports, in public places that require proof of vaccination.
Of the almost 1,000 cases of COVID-19 reported in all of Atlantic Canada recently, 2/3 of them are in New Brunswick alone. So the government is taking some very strong measures. As for the Thanksgiving weekend, you'll be able to sit around the Thanksgiving table with only the members of your family that live under the same roof. The other measure, the circuit breaker, will take effect in 3 different zones. Hot zones where the most of the cases in New Brunswick have been reported. And that will involve a number of extra restrictions over the next 14 days.
Travel to and from circuit breaker areas is prohibited unless travel is required for work, health services, child custody, child care, or post-secondary education.
And as of November 19th, if anyone in the province working in healthcare, in education, in government, crown corporations, a whole list of workplaces cannot show proof that they've been fully vaccinated, they will be sent home without pay. All of these measures are being done not just to protect people from contracting the disease, but also to alleviate the enormous stress on the healthcare system. 13 people have died in New Brunswick in the last week. There are 50 people in hospital. Half of them are occupying intensive care beds. So all of this is putting a strain on those services, but it's also having a ripple effect out into New Brunswick in general for people who need all sorts of health treatments, surgeries, and procedures. All of these measures combined are being put into effect to try to stem this 4th wave of COVID-19 in the province of New Brunswick, not just to prevent its spread, but also to protect its healthcare system from collapse. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, Halifax.
The Northwest Territories broke its COVID case record once again yesterday. On a per capita basis, its rate of infection is the highest in the country. And as Juanita Taylor reports from Yellowknife, that's more than 7 times the national average.
a territory under pressure as COVID-19 cases continue to climb in the Northwest Territories.
It is very serious. It's the worst outbreak that we've had in the Northwest Territories.
And that has all 6 beds in the ICU at the territory's largest hospital, full of patients fighting COVID-19.
We have not started to plateau yet. We are still picking up cases and worrying about our response to that. Obviously, it's stretching us as far as we can go.
Public health orders have been reinstated in Yellowknife and nearby communities. No visiting in other people's homes and limits on the number of people in shops and restaurants. Schools have been moved to online learning. This mom of 4 is feeling the pressure.
I am nervous about my children catching it, and I'm nervous about Delta just because it seems to be striking differently.
Most of the hospitalizations are unvaccinated people. 6 people have died, all Indigenous, some elders.
It really is sad because we know how much people value the knowledge keepers in the N.W.T, and to lose them to this disease is really heartbreaking.
This senior's home has 4 confirmed cases. Outside of Yellowknife, this tight-knit Indigenous community of Betchocon is hardest hit.
You're just going to assume everybody is, affected.
The chief public health officer took the extraordinary step to close off the community. Anyone going in must prove they're vaccinated or show a recent negative COVID test.
It's mentally and emotionally draining. We're confined, It'd be nice if the people start listening and taking this serious.
The Canadian Red Cross has sent in at least a dozen nurses and a couple doctors to help. It's also sent in staff to assist at a homeless shelter. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Overseas, it's been more than a month since foreign help withdrew from Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. CBC News has since returned to Kabul, where Susan Ormiston and her team find its citizens crumbling under poverty. She shows us how they're trying to survive a worsening crisis.
This is what hunger looks like. Malnourished infants, a common curse in Afghanistan, but now worse. Nasima's twins are 1 year old. The littlest one weighs in at just over 8 pounds. Really suffering. Her mother is weak herself. She can't make enough breast milk to feed both. And she tells us she can't afford formula. Almost 3 months without enough food, and since the Taliban came, no work. I have to do something for them, but I don't know what to do. Starvation lurks as families emerge from the last months of war and stare into uncertain futures. This 3-year-old made it through tuberculosis, but it weakened him. His mom, Nargis, can't find enough food for 8 kids when her husband sells corn cobs and makes less than $1 a day. Dr. Nulhak Yousafzai says these mothers come from outside Kabul because in the provinces, clinics and hospitals are collapsing. Supported by foreign funds, their budgets were frozen or cut when the Taliban came to power.
International community should help us like before. If they want to punish the government, this is the not right way. Now this punishment is for our people, for our children, for our women.
A battle for survival caught up in geopolitics. At another site in Kabul, staving off hunger, heads of families arrive early to hold a place in line, their monthly ration critical. Men separated from women, each with multiple mouths at home. This is one of hundreds of food drops in the country organized by the World Food Program. Each is registered, given a food card, carefully checked to avoid hoarding or doubling up.
Who is this?
Back of the line, women crowd around us with their stories, asking for help. Bibiko lost her husband, now alone with 6 kids. The stress of the last few months is piercing. Poverty is predicted to grip 97% of Afghans by next year.
These lines are getting longer. There'll be 1,000 come here today, maybe another 600 tomorrow. The World Food Program is struggling to keep up with the demand, especially as winter is coming.
I've been with WFP for a long time. I've never seen a situation deteriorate so quickly as it is. You know, it was already bad before August, but now it's just in free fall.
A sack of flour, a bag of beans, some cooking oil, which is doubled in price, one delivery to last a month. Aid agencies are issuing urgent appeals to separate out the aid from the politics. Without help, this battle for survival risks boiling up, complicating any prospects for stability.
And still, the exodus from this country continues. Tonight, 53 more Afghan Canadians departed from Kabul on a Qatari flight bound ultimately for Canada, along with several hundred other evacuees. The Qataris are negotiating these irregular evacuation flights with the Taliban. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Kabul.
Among the names popping up in the Pandora Papers, a number of Canadians. Why figure skater Elvis Stojko is among them. Next.
It's one of the greatest mysteries in the natural world and one of the most spectacular. Right now, hundreds of thousands of sockeye salmon are fighting their way up the rivers and streams of British Columbia. This is the biggest salmon run the province has seen in 77 years. And as Ian Hannamansing reports, that has a lot to do with a highly successful conservation program.
It is an incredible journey. 4 years ago, these sockeye salmon began their lives in this river. They've migrated to Arctic waters near Alaska, eluded animal predators and fishing nets. And now, as many as 2 million of them, their bodies turned a deep crimson, are struggling up this river in the British Columbia interior, ready to spawn.
I find it fascinating because no matter that you see that they're coming back and they're going through the same routine, no two runs have ever been the same.
Everywhere you look, there are sockeye, males and females pairing up, males and males fighting over territory. Eventually, millions of eggs will be laid, fertilized, and then the adult salmon will die. The spawning cycle of salmon might seem like a dry academic subject to some people, but for many here, they say seeing it firsthand is almost magical. A lot of people come here. By the end of the month, as many as 250,000 are expected to watch, photograph, and marvel at the spectacle.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, there's so many.
Everywhere.
It's really a wonder how they ever made it back here again.
And I guess you can only really tell by looking at some of the fish, can't you? You know, you can see the scars.
Female, lamp, and net mark.
For the Department of Fisheries, this is a busy time. Tagging and checking salmon, all part of a conservation program to help protect fish stocks from pollution, development, and overfishing. It seems to be working. The salmon population in BC has grown over the last few years. But for most people, the appeal is not so much scientific as emotional.
First time I came, I cried. I was just so moved by it. Because they came all that way and, you know, now they're spawning and then they die.
Soon, the river will be littered with carcasses. But next spring, 800 million salmon fry will emerge from beneath the rocks. And this extraordinary cycle will begin again. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, at the mouth of the Adams River.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A Vancouver police officer has been convicted of sexually assaulting his colleague. 55-year-old Jugraj Roger Barar is guilty of 1 count of sex assault. The court has found there was enough proof of consent was not provided because the victim was inebriated.
We can expand paid sick leave so that those staff who are displaying any symptoms of any infectious disease can stay home. And that those who need to isolate because of exposure can stay home.
BC's Seniors Advocate is calling on the province to expand paid sick leave for staff, hire more registered nurses, and eliminate shared rooms in long-term care homes. This is in order to prevent further outbreaks and deaths from COVID-19. 40% of long-term care staff went to work feeling unwell during the first 2 waves of the pandemic, which she says was a contributing factor in the deaths of 800 residents. Federal public servants are now required to get their COVID shots by the end of the month or be forced to take unpaid leave of absence. The same deadline applies to all people who want to travel by plane, train, or marine vessel in Canada. The Pandora Papers leaked earlier this week, naming wealthy public figures who sheltered cash to avoid taxes. Millions of files were unveiled. Jonathan Gatehouse has more on one Canadian name that stands out: 3-time world figure skating champion Elvis Stojko.
Elvis Stojko earned a reputation for leaving it all on the ice, winning 3 world championships, a pair of Olympic silver medals, and making Canadians proud. After his competitive career ended in the early 2000s, Stojko retired to Mexico, and some of his Canadian assets left too, destined for an offshore trust in Belize. Leaked documents detail how Stojko established the Quad Trust in 2007, naming it after his signature jump, transferring ownership of a life insurance policy and investment account worth up to $6.5 million, all with the help of Skate Canada, an organization that receives millions in government funds each year. Stojko's then lawyer stressed the need for secrecy, demanding trust records be kept in complete discretion and confidence, not open to any inspection whatsoever. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing by Stojko, and Belize's lack of transparency could have been a positive, says this tax expert.
You are going to be able to protect your assets from Canadian family law, from litigation against you in Canada that may or may not be deserved, people just trying to shake the money tree.
Stojko, who returned home to Canada a decade ago, declined an interview, but he did answer written questions, telling CBC News he was only vaguely aware of the arrangement. When my longtime lawyer recommended that I set up a trust, I did not question his advice. Anthony Malcolm, his late Montreal lawyer, was a tax haven specialist. Stojko describes him as a second father, a comfort as he grappled with the end of his Olympic gold dreams. At that point, I was at my lowest, Stojko wrote. Mr. Malcolm looked after all financial matters since it was a point of pain for me, since it was attached to my skating failure. But some questions remain. Skate Canada transferred the assets from its own Skaters Trust Fund to Belize. Yet the transaction doesn't appear to have been accounted for in financial statements filed with the Canada Revenue Agency. The organization and its former CEO, William Thompson, declined interviews, Thompson saying only that he was obliged to do what Stojko asked, while the current leadership of Skate Canada maintain they have nothing valuable to add. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
An astonishing breakthrough that may help stamp out one of the world's most deadliest diseases. Why the WHO is calling for a quick rollout of the new malaria vaccine. At 6:42, a live look at Science World and False Creek tonight. Some sun is on the way. Johanna breaks down when it's arriving and what follows.
Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm Callie. I'm Ethan. I'm Coda. People like to ask me how I do stuff with one hand. And we're gonna show you how we do stuff. How we do stuff. Tell me about what were some of the strategies that you used to climb?
wrapping my arm around.
Yeah?
I don't know. I just kind of went with it. And if there was like a closer one that was a little bit higher, then put your foot there or your hand there.
Do you think that you have any fun advantages as someone who has a limb difference?
Probably because it has like a little more grip when you're, you know, like holding on, so you can reach up higher with your other hand. This is how I swim. This is how I swim. This is how I swim. How I do the monkey bars is I climb on top of them, I put my feet under one of the bars, and then I take them out and put them under another bar and scoot my bum forward, and then I keep repeating that until I go to the next bar. How I do chin-ups is I grab with my left, and then I go like with my right, so the bar sits under here and goes like this, and then I pull down until I can't anymore. So how I do the monkey bars is I grab on to the bar with my left hand, I jump up so that I swing a bit, and then I grab on with my right hand, and then I go left, right, until I reach the end. How I ride my bike is my dad has fixed up the brakes so they're both on one side, so all I have to do is press one side instead of both. And I have a prosthetic on my other side, and I just slip in and then go.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, I have to say it, what the hail? I definitely got hit with some of that hard stuff today.
Thank you for that, Anita. I'm really glad that you used that. Yeah, we did see some very small hail across Metro Vancouver today, thanks to these isolated thunderstorms. And that's always a risk when we get these rotating low pressure systems, cold air aloft. Small hail as raindrops are brought up high into the thunderstorm and back down, getting coated in ice. We still have a risk over the next couple of hours, but it is waning. The other side to this, take a look at our current temperatures. It's chilly out there. You wouldn't be amiss if you thought the hail was connected to cold weather, even though it's often a fall or a spring event for us. 10 right now at YVR, 11 out towards Abbotsford. We'll see temperatures dip a couple more degrees through the overnight, and I wanted to show you what things look like across the province. A bit of a recovery for Friday, and then dipping back down for Saturday and Sunday. Most of our temperatures staying around the low double digits and even getting into highs that are just 8 and 7 for Williams Lake and Revelstoke. In through the interior, we'll see lows dip down to the freezing mark over the next couple of days. We're tracking, again, the dissipating showers as we head into Thursday morning. Just some lingering showers possible. Generally, though, a mix of sun and cloud for your afternoon. And that's in advance of a pretty good-looking Friday. Mix of sun and cloud out there with, again, cooler temperatures, but a little warmer than where we have been. Notice the next system tracking down across the coast will make for a wet day for central and northern coastal sections and fresh snow up towards the northwest. We have seen some snow at higher elevations, again, above 1,200 meters generally across the south coast, but a dusting for the top of Mount Seymour and Squamish. Tomorrow, lots of sunshine across the province, except for coastal sections. And there it is, an on again, off again forecast as we head into the weekend. Looks like we'll be bookended by sunshine, Anita, but in the middle, There'll be some good downpour, so I'll break it all down in the day to come.
Okay, thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
The World Health Organization has, for the first time, approved a vaccine against malaria. It's a major breakthrough in a global fight against a disease that continues to kill so many. Christine Birak looks at the potential impact.
It's a vaccine more than 100 years in the making.
Today, WHO is recommending the broad use of the world's first malaria vaccine.
The World Health Organization called this an historic day, saying the groundbreaking vaccine could save tens of thousands of young lives every year. Malaria killed roughly 400,000 people in 2019, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, and more than half the dead were children under 5. Spread through mosquitoes infected with malaria, one bite can take the life of a healthy child within weeks.
Today's recommendation therefore offers a glimmer of hope for the continent.
The vaccine is called RTSS. Made by GSK, it was shown to be effective 6 years ago, but the WHO wasn't convinced. The vaccine required 4 doses given to babies in Africa in their first 18 months of life. Now, 2.3 million doses later, 3 pilot programs have shown the vaccine was safe, cost-effective, and able to prevent 4 in 10 cases of malaria. Not nearly as effective as COVID vaccines developed in less than a year, but experts say there's a good reason why.
It's a bit different making a vaccine against a parasite than a virus.
Malaria is not caused by a virus, but a complex parasite that reproduces by destroying our cells. And it doesn't just escape our immune system, but transforms itself inside our body. The RTSS vaccine targets an early form of the parasite to try and stop it.
It's not a perfect vaccine, that's for sure. But at a population level, it really could help.
A second-generation malaria vaccine is also in the works. Still in phase 2 trials, early results show it's even more effective. But infectious disease experts say lives are at stake now, and they're hoping more African countries will roll out this current vaccine as quickly as possible. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
The supply chain crisis in Britain is now threatening people beyond the gas pump. It's also hitting the agricultural industry, which could threaten food supply in critical weeks before the holiday season. As Chris Brown reports, the post-Brexit worker shortage is also creating big problems for poultry and pig farmers.
Britain's supply chain crisis has its food producers crying foul.
These are actually going to be our 10-kilo turkeys at Christmas. These are going to be the big boys.
Paul Kelly has 57,000 birds here in his farm, but he says a shortage of workers who usually come from Europe to harvest and pluck the turkeys has thrown the industry into crisis.
Without those workers in the packing stations, there is no Christmas. There's no Christmas, they can't be packed.
When Britain formally left the EU 9 months ago, a lot of temporary workers went back home to Europe. It's been so bad for the trucking industry, there haven't been enough drivers to bring fuel to British gas stations, causing huge lineups. This week, military drivers had to be called out to make the deliveries.
The labour shortage for us, I mean, it's 100% Brexit. It can only be that. Last Christmas was fine.
Britain's supply chain crisis now extends far beyond turkeys to across the agricultural sector and to the people who prepare their products. Britain's meat producers say some pig farmers are now having to slaughter their animals in the barn because they're running out of space and there aren't enough workers to butcher them. Indeed, Britain may need as many as 25,000 butchers, and there are no easy solutions to recruit and train them.
The problem is, we'll get someone, train them up for 6 months, and it does take a lot of time, to train these people up. Then all of a sudden they got to go back home.
In a major speech today, Boris Johnson downplayed the crisis and rejected major changes.
And the answer to the present stresses and strains, which are mainly a function of growth and economic revival, is not to reach for that same old lever of uncontrolled immigration.
Everyone's going to have to get their heads down and hope for the best, really. But I think this it's going to, as I say, it's going to be quite a painful 2 or 3 months.
For Britons, some of their tasty Christmas traditions may be in jeopardy. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
It's the carnival of animals brought to real life. What happens when you put a symphony inside a zoo? That's next.
Since February, the Nova Scotia Brotherhood has hosted barbershop talks around the province for Black men.
I got arrested when I was 6 years old.
It's here, away from a doctor's office. They talk about the role racism has on their health.
I'm going to wear my do-rag.
Last night at St. Mary's University, the Brotherhood brought the barbershop to university students.
We've addressed this issue within in the community, so we wanted to do it in the university setting. We have a lot of individuals that are immigrants from the Caribbean as well as Africa.
Student Peter Toppin gets his haircut.
In terms of your mental health affects your physical health.
Over in the semicircle, the discussions about the role racism plays on health.
Important for Black men to be able to speak about issues like this in a safe environment.
Dwayne Winters helped organize the event.
Racism is a mental health issue, so there's so many facets of it which people don't realize. Leads to stress, and stress leads to high blood pressure. High pressure leads to diabetes.
Everyone here had stories of racism. By targeting university students, Dr. Ron Milne, the GP for the Brotherhood, hopes change can happen.
Well, I think we want to get the word out to as young people as possible, because these people are going to be the influencers of the future.
Franklin Southwell agrees. He's the president of the St. Mary's Student Association.
The whole purpose of tonight is to provide a platform for the men in our community, especially men of color, who may not have the opportunity at all times to always, be having like an avenue to express their feelings, to present themselves as being vulnerable, and just to talk about, just share a conversation of what are some of the issues that we face, especially as men of color, that that you might not hear about, especially like those small microaggressions, those small issues that you face in terms of, systemic racism, and those sort of issues that that are very prevalent in our society.
Talking about health away from a doctor's office, the Nova Scotia Brotherhood is committed to bringing health talk to unconventional settings.
Men in general, but Black men in particular, don't like going to the doctor, don't like talking about their health, and they need an environment that's safe and welcoming, where they can come and open up and talk about their concerns.
Going to universities is a new idea. They'll be back in communities, beginning with Mulgrave Park, October 18th. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Stream your favorite CBC dramas or comedies 24/7 on demand on the CBC Gem app. Plus, you can live stream CBC Vancouver News. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
The Toronto Zoo and Toronto Symphony Orchestra are collaborating on what they each do best, animals and music, respectively, of course. Symphony is a digital concert being filmed on site at the zoo. It combines the sweet sounds of animals and musicians, and the final product will show next month in schools. The CBC got a sneak peek. Take a look.
It's the next morning. The giraffes are leaving on their walk, and the mother looks back and winks at us as we're watching, and that's where you get the da 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 dee da 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 wink da da da. We've never done anything like this, and for people our vintage to be doing something like this is like this is fun. This is a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we actually started talks, and we're thinking during the pandemic, how do we build bridges to people who can't get out, can't get to the orchestra, can't get to their zoo? And from that, we have creative new music and a student program we think teachers are going to love. You know what? I've been watching, and clearly the giraffes are enjoying it. They've come up right to the front, enjoying their browse, looking relaxed, displaying those behaviors we're looking for, and our guests also really appreciate this edition.
In Symphony, Tim and I play a piece, it's called Bass Duet Number 10. It's subtitled Mother and Calf. And the first section is just the giraffes walking around, reaching up, as you see them, up for their food. The second part, you hear the baby giraffe theme. And in the third section of the music that you'll hear is a low humming, because at night, giraffes at night will herd together and they hum low tones.
So in this case, for the first piece, giraffe were the inspiration for the piece that was written by one of our musician's sons, and we will be looking for more feedback of what people want to hear about and what symphonies they want to hear from their zoo.
Looking forward to watching Symphony. I personally would like to hear a cello, perhaps with a peacock. We'll see if we can make that happen here locally. Thanks so much for watching tonight. Dan Burrett is here at 11 with more local news. Good night.